Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take a look at how to install a file transfer protocol or FTP server on our CentOS virtual machine. This video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager, as well as CentOS and networking. To begin with, we want to log on with a user that has sudo permissions, and we have chosen for the purposes of this demonstration to install the VSFTP FTP or file transfer protocol server. Now, I'll leave some of the links in the comments for this video, but I want you to follow along with me as I go about installing and doing some basic configuration of our FTP server. Now, for the connection portion and some advanced configuration, I'm going to wait to do that in a later video. And in this video, we're going to focus just simply on the first steps of the process, including modifying the firewall. So to begin with, go ahead and launch a terminal. And as with any application installation, we simply want to go ahead and make sure that there are, in fact, no additional updates to the base packages that are required. And we can accomplish this by just simply running sudo yum-y and update. In this case, it's going to do a brief check here and see that there is nothing to do. Again, you want to do this periodically, and especially before you install any new packages. Now, we're going to use the DNF package manager to install our VSFTPD service. And to begin with, then what we're going to do is just simply run sudo again, DNF install and VSFTPD. Now, in this case, I'm going to leave off the -y because I like to review what packages and dependencies are going to be installed. Once you're happy with the list, you simply select Y, and then it downloads and installs them. Now, at this point, when we get our command prompt back, what we will want to do is just verify that we did, in fact, get the service set up and installed, and we can do that by simply again using our sudo systemctl and status of our VSFTP daemon or service. And you can see here that the status is that it's loaded, but it's disabled and it is currently inactive, which means basically that the executable is not running, and that while the service is installed, it is, first of all, not set to automatically start up when you reboot your virtual machine, but is also currently not running. And that's fine because that gives us the chance then to make some basic configuration changes. And to accomplish that, we're going to cd to the root of the directory, and then we're going to cd into the etc directory, as well as the VSFTPD folder. And if we do an ls-l, you'll see that we've got a number of configuration files. What we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at that vsftpd.conf file, which is the configuration file for our FTP server. We're going to make some very minor changes in this video and then follow this up with some more sophisticated changes to harden our server. But in order to be able to accomplish this, then what we need to do is either log on with a user that has permissions to modify files in this directory, or again, just simply use sudo along with your favorite text editor. In this case, I'm going to use gedit, and I'm going to edit the vsftpd.conf file. Now, you'll see that the conf file, much like with other configuration files, is essentially a mix of commented and uncommented features. In this case, many of the defaults will be perfectly acceptable to us. Just want us to get started on looking through what some of them are. Particularly, we're interested in allowing anonymous FTP. Anonymous FTP means that we do not require a username and a password to be able to log on to your FTP or file transfer protocol server. Keep in mind that the purpose behind an FTP server might be to host files for people to pick up, for instance, the ISO for Linux distribution, maybe some application that you've written, and so on. The other option or other scenario might be that you have a folder created on the FTP server where you can upload files from a user or maybe from an application. And this can be used, for instance, in IoT projects. But we do want them to log in with a username and password. And so we're going to leave the default alone here so that anonymous enabled is equal to no. Additionally, with along the same lines rather, is going to be the local enable equal to yes. And that is that we're actually going to use our local accounts, or our ability to manage local accounts, to manage the accounts for the FTP server. What does that mean? Well, in another video, we actually will have to go through and create a user and then also set up the location on the file system that they can log into. Again, for right now, we're going to leave the default alone here, and we're going to allow for local enable equal to yes. Again, which that allows for us to manage our FTP server using local accounts. And we also, for this video, the only other real change that we're going to make, at least with the defaults, is going to be to uncomment this enable any form of the FTP write command. We're going to leave that again alone. Now, we're going to come back and we're going to make some changes to the behavior controlling whether we could CD from one directory to another. But the other additional change that we want to make in our configuration file will be down here at the bottom. And we simply want to enable passive FTP. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we start doing our connections. But we want to specify a range of ports that will allow for us to connect passively to our FTP server. And the way that you go about doing this is you simply use, again, another directive that allows for us to specify the minimum and maximum ports, or rather a range of ports that we can passively connect to our FTP server. And to do that, we simply use the PASV _min_port equal to, in this case, we're going to go ahead and set this up as 3000. Keep it similar to some of the instructions I'm going to provide in the comments. And then again, we're going to use the directive here, passive max port equal to 31,000. Now, this is probably far, far, far too many ports to be open for your FTP server, unless you know that you are expecting quite a few users. But again, you can simply adjust this range as necessary. All right, so the other thing that we want to do is we want to just quickly take a look at one more basic setting in this file related to the ports. And if you'll notice here, we have the ability to control our IPv6 or the IPv4, and I accidentally scrolled past it here. I might just have to do a find here. So there we go. If we set the listen directive as enabled for the IPv4, then it will run in standalone mode and listen only on IPv4 sockets. In other words, basically, if we want to restrict access to our FTP server to only IPv4 addresses versus the ability to allow for both IPv4 and IPv6 connections. And again, we're just simply going to leave these defaults alone, but we want to be aware of that. At this point, we can go ahead and save it. We'll go ahead and close our gedit. And what we want to do is we want to adjust now our firewall to allow for the ports associated with the FTP service. And to do that, we again want to use sudo. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to use our firewall -cmd command. And just in case you've forgotten how this behaves, you can always just do -- and hit tab a couple of times, and it'll show you all of the options associated with our firewall command. And the ones that were of particular interest to us is going to be the ability to add a port. And in this case, we're actually going to add a range of ports. And we also want to make sure that whatever changes we make are going to be, in fact, permanent. And what we'll do here is we will simply then add the ports associated with our FTP service. So that's going to be our ports 20 to 21, and they are going to be of type TCP or for the TCP protocol. And again, we want to make those changes permanent. Again, we get prompted for the password for our sudo access, and then we can simply repeat this now for those passive ports. So we'll start at 30,000 and we'll go up to 31,000. Again, that's probably far too many ports to have open. But again, since we're working on a virtual machine and this is our first opportunity to play around with a FTP server, then it's probably fine. As you gain some more familiarity with this, you'll want to adjust then the accessibility of your FTP server. At this point, then what you want to do is you simply want to make sure that the configuration changes have in fact stuck, and we can simply reload then the configuration for the firewall. Again, we have success. And then another feature that's useful is just simply to list the ports that are open. And so at this point, you'll see that I have my 20 to 21 for TCP, as well as my 30,000 to 31,000 also for TCP. At this point, we should be pretty close to setting up or starting up our FTP server. And in order to do that, then all we need to do is again run this sudo command with, in this case, our systemctl. And we are going to start our VSFTP daemon. And again, this doesn't provide us any feedback unless there's an error. So the best way to check to make sure is just simply to run the status command. And you can see that now we are still currently disabled for the service. However, it is actively running. What does that mean? Is it means that if we were to reboot this virtual machine, the service would not automatically start. We'll look at how to enable this service then in a later video, but right now for testing and for setup, you probably want to have a little bit of manual control over the service. The last thing that you want to do for the purposes of initially setting this FTP server up is to run our nmap command or nmap tool against our local loopback adapter. And you'll see that we do, in fact, have port 21 open for TCP. The other IP address that we want to check, we can simply find this out using our if config, would be our statically declared IP address that's associated with our server. And we probably also want to go ahead and run nmap against this one as well. So 192.168.2.97. And again, this will show us that our FTP server is available and open for connections on our server. And by doing this, by checking both the local loopback adapter as well as the statically assigned IP address to our S8 interface, it simply means that it's listing on both of those IP address and port combinations. And again, you can control a little bit of that through firewall rules and so on if you have a system that has multiple IP addresses. So at this point, then we know that our FTP server is up and running, but we are not going to test it in this video. Hopefully this will get you a good start on setting up your FTP server. We'll look at advanced configurations and connecting, as well as creating user accounts in later videos. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.